Chapter 1 The Encounter. Zalanth awoke to the flickering glow of emergency lights, the sharp tang of burnt circuits, filling the air. His head throbbed with the aftershock of the battle, and his chest heaved as he took in his surroundings. The once proud warship, now reduced to a graveyard of twisted metal and shattered screens, was all that remained of his people. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant hum of a failing life support system. He tried to rise, but pain lanced through his side, a reminder of the wounds he had sustained in the last, desperate stand. His claws curled into fists as memories of the destruction flooded his mind, his homeworld, decimated by a relentless enemy, his comrades obliterated in the blink of an eye. Zalanth, the last warrior of his kind, had survived, but for what? Revenge? Survival? The questions gnawed at him, but the answers eluded him like shadows in the dark. The ship's proximity alarm blared, a sudden, jarring sound that shattered his bleak reverie. Zalanth's eyes narrowed as he forced himself to stand, ignoring the searing pain. A small vessel was approaching, its signature unfamiliar. His fingers hovered over the ship's remaining weapon systems, but he hesitated. His reserves were depleted, and the thought of another fight brought no solace, only exhaustion. Through the viewport, he saw the ship, a human craft, small and unassuming, nothing like the war machines he had faced before. His mind raced. What were they doing here, in this forsaken corner of the galaxy? Scavengers? Or perhaps something more sinister? The thought of encountering another species, especially humans, filled him with both disdain and curiosity. They were known as survivors, but also as unpredictable and dangerous. A voice crackled through the comms, breaking the tense silence. "This is Captain Elias Monroe of the Terran vessel Horizon. We detected your distress signal and are here to offer assistance. Please respond." Zalanth hesitated. Accepting help from humans was unthinkable, yet his options were few. His ship was dying, and with it, his chances of survival. His hand trembled as he reached for the comms panel, his mind warring between pride and desperation. "You're wasting your time, human," Zalanth growled, his voice a rasping echo of its former strength. "There is nothing left here for you." There was a pause on the other end, as if the human was considering his response. "Maybe not for me," Monroe finally replied, his tone steady. "But there's something here worth saving. You." The simplicity of the statement struck Zalanth like a physical blow. Worth saving? It was a concept he had not considered in the longest time. His people, his purpose, everything had been stripped away, leaving him with nothing but the cold void of space. The idea that a human, a being he had always considered inferior, would see value in his survival was as bewildering as it was disarming. The human ship edged closer, its docking clamps engaging with a soft clank that echoed through the silent corridors. Zalanth's pulse quickened, a mixture of fear and anger surging within him. As the airlock hissed open, he steeled himself, ready to face whatever came next. The door slid aside, revealing Captain Monroe, a tall, weathered man with sharp eyes and a calm demeanor. Behind him stood a few crew members, their expressions cautious but not hostile. Monroe took a step forward, his gaze meeting Zalanth's, unflinching. "Let's get you out of here," Monroe said, his voice firm but not unkind. "There's a place for you with us if you're willing." Zalanth's claws flexed at his sides, his mind torn between pride and survival. The tension in the air was palpable, each breath heavy with the weight of the decision before him. His instincts screamed to refuse, to fight, to die as a warrior should. But a quieter voice, one he had almost forgotten, whispered that perhaps, just perhaps, there was still something to live for. With a final, reluctant nod, Zalanth stepped forward, crossing the threshold into the human vessel. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in what felt like an eternity, it was a path with a future. Chapter 2 The Struggle. Zalanth's every muscle tensed as the airlock sealed behind him, the metallic clang echoing in the narrow corridor. The human vessel, though small, was a maze of dimly lit passageways and humming machinery, a stark contrast to the grand, open spaces of his lost warship. The scent of recycled air mixed with the faint aroma of oil and sweat, a reminder that this was a vessel of survival, not comfort. Captain Monroe led the way, his steps purposeful yet unhurried. Zalanth followed, his sharp eyes scanning every corner, every shadow. The human crew watched him with cautious curiosity, their hands never straying far from their weapons. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension, the kind that comes from two predators forced into uneasy proximity. "Medical bays just ahead," Monroe said, his voice breaking the silence. "You've taken quite a beating. Our medic can patch you up. I need no aid," Zalanth snarled, his pride flaring. "I have endured worse." Monroe paused, turning to face him. There was no fear in the captain's gaze, only a measured patience. "Maybe so, but you're not alone anymore. Let us help." The words grated against Zalantha's instincts. To accept help was to show weakness, and weakness was death. Yet, as he looked into Monroe's eyes, he saw no pity, only a genuine offer of assistance. It was this sincerity that gave him pause. Reluctantly, he nodded, allowing Monroe to guide him into the sterile, white room of the medical bay. The medic, a young woman with steady hands and a calm demeanor, approached cautiously. She began her work in silence, cleaning and dressing Zalantha's wounds with meticulous care. The sting of antiseptic was sharp, but Zalanth made no sound, his mind too occupied with the deeper wounds within, those of betrayal, loss, and a shattered purpose. As she worked, the ship shuddered, a deep rumble resonating through its hull. Zalantha's senses sharpened, his warrior instincts alert to the change. Monroe's expression hardened, and he tapped his communicator. "Bridge report. Captain, we've detected a hostile signature on an intercept course." The voice crackled back. "They'll be on us in minutes." Zalantha's heart quickened. The enemy, the ones who had annihilated his world, were closing in. His first instinct was to take command, to direct the humans as he would his own soldiers. But this wasn't his ship, and these weren't his people. He was a guest, an outsider. Monroe's eyes met Zalantha's, a silent understanding passing between them. "We'll need your expertise," Monroe said, a trace of urgency in his voice. "You know their tactics better than anyone." Zalanth hesitated, the weight of the decision heavy on his shoulders. To involve himself in this battle was to acknowledge a new alliance, to place his trust in those he had once considered beneath him. Yet the alternative, standing by while these humans faced certain death, was unthinkable. They had shown him kindness, something he had believed extinct in the galaxy. Without a word, Zalanth rose from the medical table, ignoring the medic's protests. He followed Monroe to the bridge, the pulse of the ship's engines vibrating beneath his feet like the heartbeat of a living being. As they entered the command center, the crew turned to him, their eyes filled with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," Zalanth ordered, his voice firm, each word carrying the authority of a battle-hardened leader. "They will strike fast and without warning. We must be faster." Monroe gave a sharp nod, relaying the orders. The crew sprang into action, their movements precise and coordinated. Zalanth watched as the enemy's ships appeared on the view screen, sleek and deadly, their weapons charging for an attack. The tension on the bridge was palpable, the air thick with anticipation and fear. The first volley of plasma bolts streaked toward them, and Zalantha's mind raced, calculating trajectories and countermeasures with the precision of a seasoned strategist. He directed the crew with clipped commands, his voice cutting through the chaos. The human ship danced through space, narrowly avoiding each blast, but the enemy was relentless. Just as a bolt grazed the hull, the ship jolted, systems flickering. The bridge dimmed, and a chill ran through Zalanth as he realized the situation was more dire than he had anticipated. "We can't keep this up," Monroe muttered, his hands gripping the edge of the console. "We need a miracle." Zalantha's gaze locked onto the enemy flagship, his mind formulating a plan as bold as it was desperate. "Then we make one," he said, a cold determination settling over him. The enemy was closing in, but Zalanth had faced the abyss before. He knew what had to be done, and for the first time in years, he felt the stirrings of a purpose beyond mere survival. Divert all power to the engines, Zalanth commanded. We're going straight through them. Monroe's eyes widened, but he didn't hesitate. You heard him. Full power! The engines roared to life, and the ship surged forward, straight into the heart of the enemy formation. Zalanth gripped the railing, his eyes narrowing as the enemy ships loomed larger on the view screen. This was it, the moment that would define his fate, and perhaps the fate of those he had come to respect, if not yet fully trust. As the ship hurtled toward its target, Zalanth braced himself for impact, every muscle coiled, every sense heightened. This was no longer just about survival. It was about proving, to himself and to these humans, that there was still something left to fight for. The chapter ended with the ship racing toward the enemy, tension at its peak, leaving the outcome uncertain and the stakes higher than ever. Chapter 3 The Battle Within. The horizon hurtled through space, every inch of its hull straining under the immense pressure of the impossible maneuver. Zalantha's gaze remained fixed on the enemy flagship as it grew larger in the viewport, its sleek, menacing form a testament to the power that had decimated his world. He could feel the tension crackling in the air, the unspoken fear of the crew as they braced for impact. Hold steady! Zalanth barked, his voice cutting through the mounting panic. The crew responded with disciplined efficiency, though their eyes betrayed the terror simmering beneath the surface. This was not a battle they were meant to win, not through brute force, at least. But Zalanth had never been one to accept the odds as they were. As the enemy vessels closed in, the ship shuddered, a violent tremor that rattled the consoles and sent sparks flying from the walls. Zalantha's claws dug into the railing, anchoring himself as he surveyed the battlefield. He could see the enemy's strategy unfolding, an encirclement meant to crush them from all sides. It was a tactic he knew well, one that had once been used against his own people with devastating effect. We're in their kill zone, Monroe muttered, his hands white-knuckled on the controls. We need to break free before they close the net. Not yet, Zalanth replied, his voice a low growl. He could sense the unease in Monroe, the human's instinct to retreat, to regroup. But Zalanth knew that the only way to survive was to embrace the very chaos the enemy had created. He turned to Monroe, his eyes blazing with the intensity of his resolve. You said you needed a miracle. This is how we make one. Before Monroe could respond, Zalanth issued the command that would seal their fate. Reverse thrusters. Full power. Spin the ship. The order was met with stunned silence. To spin a ship at such velocity, in such close proximity to the enemy, was madness. But Zalantha's strategy was one of calculated chaos, a maneuver so unexpected, so reckless, that it could disrupt the enemy's formation long enough to create an opening. Monroe hesitated for only a fraction of a second before relaying the order. The crew sprang into action, their hands flying across consoles as the ship's engines roared to life. The horizon lurched violently as it reversed course, the centrifugal force slamming everyone against their restraints. The view outside the viewport became a blur of stars and enemy ships as the vessel began to spin, its hull groaning under the strain. The enemy, caught off guard by the audacity of the move, faltered. Their ships, now disoriented by the rapid spin of the horizon, struggled to maintain their positions. Zalanth seized the moment, his mind a whirlwind of tactical calculations. Target their engines! He shouted. Fire at will! The ship's cannons blazed to life, unleashing a torrent of plasma bolts that streaked through the chaos. The enemy ships, caught in the crossfire, were hit from all angles, their shields buckling under the relentless assault. Explosions blossomed in the darkness of space, lighting up the void with fiery bursts of destruction. But the victory was far from secure. The enemy flagship, though damaged, remained a formidable threat, its weapons charging for a devastating counterattack. Zalanth could see the energy build up on their scanners, the imminent danger of a strike that could end them all. We can't take another hit like that, Monroe said, his voice tight with urgency. What's the plan? Zalantha's mind raced. The spin had bought them precious seconds, but it would not be enough to escape unscathed. They needed a final gambit, something so audacious that it would either secure their survival or end in their complete annihilation. Direct all power to the forward shields and engines, Zalanth ordered. We're going straight through their hull. Monroe's eyes widened in disbelief. You're suggesting a ramming maneuver? It's our only chance, Zalanth replied, his voice cold and resolute. If we hit them hard enough, we'll disrupt their systems and create an opening for our escape. There was no time for debate. Monroe nodded sharply, and the crew set to work, diverting all remaining energy to the ship's bow. The engines roared to life once more, propelling the Horizon toward the enemy flagship at breakneck speed. The tension on the bridge was palpable, each second stretching into an eternity as they closed in on their target. The enemy flagship loomed before them, its weapons primed to fire. Zalanth could feel the eyes of the crew on him, their faith resting on his judgment, their lives in his hands. He steeled himself, every muscle coiled with anticipation. This was the moment of truth. Impact in 3, 2, 1. The Horizon slammed into the enemy vessel with a force that shook the very fabric of space. Metal crumpled, energy fields crackled, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. The shockwave rippled through the ship, sending consoles sparking and alarms blaring. Zalanth was thrown against the railing, his vision swimming as the bridge was engulfed in a maelstrom of noise and light. As the dust settled, the view outside the viewport cleared, revealing the enemy flagship, its hull breached, its systems flickering, its power failing. They had done it. The impossible maneuver had worked. But the victory was bittersweet. The Horizon was severely damaged, its systems on the brink of collapse. Zalanth could see the exhaustion in the eyes of the crew, the realization that their fight was far from over. They had survived this battle, but the war was still raging, and their journey was only beginning. As the chapter ended, the crew prepared for what lay ahead, their resolve steeled by the harrowing experience. Zalanth, too, felt a change within himself, a growing respect for these humans who had fought so valiantly beside him. But beneath the surface, the conflict within him simmered, a struggle between his warrior instincts and the unfamiliar bond forming with those he had once considered enemies. Chapter 4, A Warrior's Honor. The Horizon limped through the blackness of space, its once proud hull battered and bruised from the brutal encounter. The bridge was eerily silent, save for the occasional crackle of damaged systems and the low hum of life support. Zalanth stood at the center, his eyes fixed on the dimming stars ahead, his thoughts as turbulent as the ship's flickering lights. We've stabilized the core, but we're still losing power, Monroe reported, his voice tight with exhaustion. We won't last long without full repairs. Zalanth nodded, acknowledging the grim reality of their situation. The battle had been won, but the cost had been severe. The crew was worn thin, their resilience tested beyond its limits. Yet, in their eyes, he saw no fear, only a resolute determination to push forward, to survive. We'll make it, Zalanth said, though the words felt hollow even to him. His mind churned with the weight of their predicament. The enemy fleet might be in disarray, but they were far from defeated. And now, with their ship crippled, the odds of survival had plummeted. But Zalanth had learned something in the fire of battle, something that stirred within him, challenging the beliefs he had held for so long. These humans, so fragile in appearance, had shown a strength that went beyond physical prowess. They fought with a fierce resolve born of something deeper, a loyalty to one another that transcended the battlefield. His gaze shifted to Monroe, who was poring over the damage reports with a furrowed brow. Zalanth felt a pang of respect for the man, a respect that he had not anticipated. Monroe was not just a soldier, he was a leader, driven not by glory but by the need to protect those under his command. Monroe, Zalanth began, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. There's something you need to know. Monroe looked up, curiosity mixed with caution in his eyes. What is it? Zalanth hesitated, the words catching in his throat. He had never spoken of the past, of the loss that had driven him to the brink of despair. But now, in the quiet aftermath of battle, he felt a need to share it, to offer some understanding of the darkness that had shadowed his actions. Years ago, my world was attacked, Zalanth said slowly, his voice rough with the memory. My people were warriors, proud and strong. But we were unprepared for the brutality of the assault. We fought, but in the end, we were overwhelmed. I was one of the few who survived. Monroe listened in silence, his expression softening as Zalanth continued. Since then, I have harbored a deep hatred for those who took everything from me. Zalanth admitted, his hands clenching into fists. I swore vengeance on all who stood in my way. But now, I see that my hatred blinded me. It made me reckless, made me lose sight of what truly matters. He paused, struggling to find the right words. You and your crew, you fought not just for survival, but for each other. It's a strength I had forgotten, a strength that saved us today. For that I am grateful. Monroe was silent for a moment, digesting the weight of Zalanth's confession. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, understanding. We all have our demons, Zalanth, Monroe said quietly. But we also have the power to choose what defines us. You've fought with us, bled with us. That makes you one of us. And as long as we stand together, we have a chance. Zalanth felt a warmth spread through him, a sense of belonging he had not felt in years. The burden of his past was still there, but it was lighter now, shared among those who had become more than just allies. The ship lurched slightly, a reminder of their precarious state. But for the first time, Zalanth felt a glimmer of hope. They had survived the impossible, and together, they would face whatever came next. Let's get to work, Zalanth said, a new determination in his voice. We're not out of this yet. Monroe nodded, a faint smile on his lips. Agreed. We've got a lot more fight left in us. As the crew rallied to repair the ship, Zalanth took one last look at the stars, his thoughts no longer consumed by vengeance but by the promise of a future worth fighting for. He turned back to the task at hand, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, with his newfound comrades by his side. The chapter closed with the horizon continuing its journey, battered but unbroken, a symbol of the resilience and unity that had emerged from the crucible of battle. Zalanth, once a lone warrior consumed by loss, now found strength in the bond he had forged with the humans, and in the hope that together, they could carve out a path to a brighter future.